You could never measure up to my ex, she declared loudly, making sure the nearby couple could hear every word. The tension in the air heightened not at the moment she spoke, but in the heavy silence that followed, enveloping us like setting concrete. Forks hesitated in midair, glasses paused motionless. A lone drop of wine clung desperately to the rim of her glass, as if even it wanted to escape the awkward moment. Across from me, Denise smirked with the smugness of someone who believed they had achieved victory. It was our anniversary. 40 years since we first met, 36 since we exchanged vows, 24 since we settled into the house I meticulously designed over 2 years, 12 since I retired and granted her the freedom to explore her passions through yoga, a seat on a nonprofit board, and apparently wistful memories of her high school sweetheart as a benchmark for her life. She eyed me expectantly, waiting for a reaction. I gave her none. I calmly finished chewing, swallowed, delicately wiped my mouth with a napkin, as if critiquing a steak, not a marriage. Then, with a single composed nod, I uttered, "Thanks, more." After the update, I addressed her friends at the table, saying my dear friends once upon a time causing some discomfort among them. Carol reached for the check. Mitch pretended to receive a work call, and the waiter hesitated with my creme brulee, unsure whether to serve it or retreat. Despite the reactions of others, I remained still and calm, confidently taking the dessert. What no one, especially Denise, realized was that my composed silence wasn't a reaction of shock, but a strategic response. I had already deciphered the subtle hints she had been leaving behind, akin to breadcrumbs, indicating a desire to be caught while maintaining a victim facade. The gym bag that carried a lingering cologne scent unfamiliar to me. An abrupt return to enjoying whiskey sours, his old favorite drink revealed in a drunken episode of flipping through a yearbook. The nostalgic 90s playlist playing on the kitchen speaker with heartfelt reminders, and most notably, the emerald necklace she wore. A gift from him during their college days, found by me in a sealed box in our attic 5 years ago. A discovery I chose to keep to myself. She would later claim she pawned it. She wore the necklace during a tough time, and now it hung around her neck, shining brightly and reminding her of him. Still, I wasn't caught off guard. I was prepared. I observed her cheerful demeanor as we exited the restaurant, linked with Carol, whispering audibly so I could hear, about how he remained motionless, not even making an effort for her. They believed I would break down, retreat into my secluded space she never ventured into, silently nursing my wounds while she played flirtatiously on social platforms and removed her ring for photos. However, I wasn't sulking. I was gathering information because a couple of months ago I had engaged a digital investigation company. A discreet recommendation from a friend, after Dennis mistakenly sent me a Venmo transaction intended for someone named Jay. The accompanying message read, "Last night was fire," followed by three cold emojis and a wink. I acted clueless. "Is this for me?" She responded, "Oops, meant to send it to Janet." Right, Janet from Iowa, who despises texting. That simple mistake cost her dearly. I had to mimic her phone activity. She had no idea that all her photos, notes, app backups, and voice memos were being quietly and legally mirrored to a separate cloud folder. I refrained from checking it immediately. Instead, I waited patiently, allowing her to unknowingly dig her own grave and celebrate her actions with champagne. After the final shovel of dirt was metaphorically thrown at that dinner in the parking lot, she questioned my silence. I regarded her as a mere extra in a movie scene, before silently unlocking the car door and getting inside. I let her revel in her own glory, assuming I was oblivious to her actions, as she texted someone about her perceived victory over her current partner. Little did she know that I had possession of every piece of information she held dear, including those late-night whispers she thought were secret. As she blissfully drifted off to sleep, thinking about someone else, I sat at my laptop and typed just a single word: proceed. And with that, she unknowingly made the material public, attaching a file named Pre-Anniversary Revisions before sending it off. Her mind preoccupied with thoughts of her past flame, she remained unaware that her future was being meticulously dismantled, one clause at a time. The first message popped up in the group chat less than 20 minutes after we arrived home. I hadn't even finished taking off my shoes when it came through. He just sat there passively as the words rolled in. Then came the punchline. It was almost too effortless. I almost felt guilty. Almost. She posted three laughing emojis, a gif of a bored cat, and a selfie she had taken under the restaurant chandelier with me in the blurry background mid-bite. The caption read, "This man still thinks we're in love." Laughs erupted from Carol, Lauren, and even Marcy, her cousin who had once sobbed on our couch after her boyfriend left her for a younger woman. Now she too was part of the mockery. I chose not to react, not to engage, not to slam doors or throw objects in anger. I simply walked past her in the hallway. She didn't even lift her eyes from her phone, still chuckling, still scrolling. Mockingly, she called out, "Don't worry, Roger, you were a great audience." I paused only to check the thermostat. She always cranked it up after drinking cheap wine, turning into a sweaty egotist. Calmly and methodically, I readjusted it back down. In my office, I switched on the MacBook Pro was unfamiliar to her. She didn't have the password for it, not the main one, but the other one, the quiet one. Surprisingly, the folder was already open. Inside, there was an exit package containing various important documents, PDF copies of our trust agreement, a timeline spreadsheet detailing suspicious transactions from the past 18 months, screenshots of her private messages, and a scanned copy of a prenup she believed had expired. There was also a new document with a revised property distribution clause, marked for review by my lawyer. I quickly composed a message instructing Miles to follow up on the public disparagement clause, referencing specific pages in Addendum 3 and uploading all necessary documents to the court portal with a confidentiality alert. I attached a file named pre-anniversary revisions.diff and sent it off without hesitation. As the upload completed seamlessly, I felt a sense of stillness, realizing that the person I once knew across the hall was no longer the same. Dennis's laughter from the other room continued unabated. As I passed through the kitchen, Elf was on a video call with Lauren, proudly recounting the toast as if it were a triumph. I couldn't resist the jab, telling Elf he'll never be half the man my ex is. His reaction was priceless. He looked like a dejected puppy. To my surprise, he actually thanked me. Lauren, amused, commented, "Girl, that's legendary. You should be on Real Housewives." Denise, appearing unfazed, took a leisurely sip and remarked, "Did he even flinch?" Laughing, she added, "I think he's losing his marbles." Watching her reflection in the microwave door, Denise seemed smug and oblivious. Little did she know that her actions that night not only embarrassed a man, but also destroyed her safety net. The art of timing is such that most people only realize they're trapped after it's too late. By the time Denise had finished her third glass, my attorney had already filed the necessary documents for emergency review. The house she believed we co-owned had now been identified for asset reassessment. The joint account she had recently used to purchase new shoes was frozen by a court order. Thinking she could embarrass me in front of our friends, she unknowingly provided me with valuable legal evidence in the presence of witnesses. Rather than reacting with anger, I chose the power of silence, which I employed at 1:17 a.m. as her laughter shifted from its previous attention-seeking tone to a more intimate and subdued sound. It reached me through the wall. I could tell she was lying in bed, wrapped in the luxurious linen sheets I had purchased last fall, whispering on her phone as if sneaking past curfew like a teenager. Although I didn't eavesdrop, I was already in possession of the information. Dennis was unaware that her iCloud backups were being mirrored. I hadn't resorted to installing spyware or engaging in any illegal activities. Rather, I had used a recovery method that an acquaintance had previously shared with me, as life was left in ruins by his own divorce. An additional iCloud device was discreetly set up under the same Apple ID, all done within legal bounds and easily traceable to his ex-wife. I had access to everything she stored, every message, every live photo, even those moments she tried to erase quickly. It was no surprise when I saw her message pop up. "Guess who I embarrassed tonight?" The accompanying photos showed me gazing down at my dessert, with the background intentionally blurred. She had propped up her wine glass and her friend's shocked expressions. Then came her next message. "Wish it was you waiting for me at home," followed by a black heart emoji, the digital equivalent of a slap in the face. The name Jared was mentioned. He was the J from her failed Venmo transaction a while back. He used to work as a bartender at a resort we visited 15 years ago. She encountered him again at her friend's yoga retreat last spring, the same retreat where she insisted there was no self-service. Turns out there was, just not for me. The irony was that Jared had now become a landscaping contractor with an ego so overinflated you could see it from miles away. Attempting to revive their brief high school summer romance in a misguided attempt at recapturing youth, she believed leveraging it as a source of power. Thinking that taunting me in a private message thread elevated her to a femme fatale figure, she failed to realize that her actions were not seductive but rather incriminating. At 1:21 a.m., she brazenly messaged him, reminiscing about his past prowess in bed and expressing regret for settling down. Unfazed by her words, I calmly proceeded to download the do.zip file, transferring its contents from her cloud storage to my secure drive, each file meticulously labeled and timestamped for future reference. The pain of betrayal lies not solely in the act of infidelity, but in the arrogance and assurance displayed by the perpetrator, believing they can deceive without consequence, underestimating your intelligence and perceptiveness. Yet in my composed silence, I was meticulously documenting every piece of evidence. By 2:04 a.m., our entire photo gallery had been synchronized, unveiling a snapshot from a recent all-girls getaway where she claimed they had a quiet evening in watching movies and sipping tea. Curiously, the image revealed a detail I had not noticed before: a tattoo adorning one of her friend's wrists, prompting a new set of questions to unravel. A bricklayer's calloused hands or resting on his hips. The warrior stood before me, Jared, shirtless, holding a champagne bottle, while Denise posed with a pout in the background. The photo was saved as DSCN underscore 1434, a mundane and uninspired choice. I promptly forwarded it to Miles, my attorney, with the subject line, "Supplemental materials, disparagement, and adultery threats." There was no commentary or lotion in the email, just the cold hard data. As I sat in the bedroom, I could hear the muffled buzz of Dennis's phone on the nightstand. She giggled softly as she responded to another message. I didn't bother checking. I already had enough evidence. My focus was not on confrontation, but on meticulously building a digital barrier, one brick at a time, that she would eventually collide with. While she believed she was penning a love story, I was crafting the final chapter, and she unknowingly provided me with a closing paragraph. At 3:12 a.m., Dennis drifted off to sleep, snoring softly next to an empty wine glass and a mind clouded by self-deception. At 3:13 a.m., I calmly logged into the family financial dashboard, carrying out my actions with quiet precision and determination. She never bothered learning about wasted motion. That was always Roger's area. Her strengths, as she often mentioned to dinner guests, lay in her interpersonal skills. In other words, she excelled at flirting, remembering birthdays, and charming waiters into giving us free dessert. Estate structuring and tax-shielded investments were my specialties. Now, as she closed the door on that world behind her, I focused on the joint brokerage account, holding $500,000 in change. Surprisingly impressive for a woman who viewed me as retired and dull. I had established a firewall a year ago when she began neglecting our Sunday rituals. Back then, the trust was merely a dormant shell. But tonight, it came to life as the funds swiftly transferred into the Calhoun Heritage Irrevocable Trust. The term irrevocable was crucial, ensuring Dennis's name was never attached. I had used Calhoun, my mother's maiden name, even on the paperwork as a precaution. By 3:26, the trust had taken ownership of the brokerage account, marking the beginning of a new chapter. Next, the house. She thought it was ours, laughed once about putting up her Pilates certificate in the guest room like it meant something. But the title hadn't been in our names for over 4 years. Back when my niece graduated law school, we formed a holding company, Pinwheel Capital LLC. I told Denise it was a tax write-off for her internship. She bought it hook, line, and Chardonnay. In reality, Pinwheel bought our house cash. Quietly, I still paid the property taxes, still did the yard work, still repaired the gutters. But legally, we were tenants with a month-to-month agreement. The only difference between a landlord and a husband is paperwork, and I had plenty. By 3:41, I filed a notice of reorganization with the county clerk. Routine, automatic, but it ensured that in any asset audit, Dennis's name would appear nowhere. Her contribution to the property had been a Pinterest board. At 3:49, I accessed my secondary checking account, which had been untouched for months and was reserved for emergencies. I transferred the remaining joint funds of $87,492.14 in one swift move. Dennis preferred using a black Amex card with her name on it for the image it portrayed, rather than for actual functionality. The joint card was linked to money she hadn't used since Easter, which worked out conveniently for me. By 4 o'clock, I changed the mailing address for all statements to a P.O. box under the trust name and updated the online profile with a new symbolic image: a raven, symbolizing waiting, watching, and remembrance. After completing these tasks, I closed the laptop, grabbed a glass of water, and relaxed. As Denise stirred in bed and murmured about a broken thermostat, I chuckled inwardly. The thermostat was working fine. She was the one feeling cold. Tomorrow, she would wake up still thinking she had all the access and control. Options for leverage were still available. A version of me remained on standby, prepared for her outburst to subside. But tonight, she found me unreachable as her mind wandered to Jared's flattery and her next Instagram post. I had sealed off all exits behind her. The scrutiny was not just icy, it was precise. I awoke luxuriously at 9:43 a.m., a rarity I hadn't indulged in for years. Sunlight penetrated the blinds, casting a gentle light show on the wooden floor. Stretching and yawning, I ventured into the kitchen. French press, Kenyan roast. The refrigerator hummed softly. I took my time, allowing the chaos of the world to fade into the background. I had crafted this moment to be serene. When I finally checked my phone, the screen exploded with notifications. 255 missed calls. Denise, her sister, an unfamiliar number, one labeled as Yoga Susan, and another unidentified, likely Jared attempting to assert relevance. Then came the flood of voicemails. I'm at the damn gas station and this idiot is holding my wallet. Roger, call me right now. She was breathing like she'd run a marathon, fueled by entitlement and espresso shots. Next message, her sister Cynthia, fake sweet but on edge. Roger, I don't know what's going on, but Denise is hysterical. She said your house, is locked. Change locks. Are you okay? I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Ah, that word again, misunderstanding, like adultery is just bad communication. The third one was my favorite. Jared's number short clipped. Hey man, not sure what's happening, but Denise is really upset. Thought maybe we could talk. Click. I didn't even finish it. I let the voicemail delete itself like it wasn't even worth storing. Meanwhile, texts were coming in like popcorn kernels under pressure. Roger, this isn't funny. Are you seriously freezing me out? The mortgage company said the account name changed. Where is our money? What did you do? Each message more frantic than the last. What caught my attention wasn't the noise, but rather the timing of events. It all began at 7:12 a.m. when she encountered issues purchasing coffee. Her Amex card was declined, initially dismissed as a technical error. The situation escalated when her debit card also failed at the gas station. By 7:30, she was at her sister's house, repeatedly attempting to call my number from Cynthia's phone. Around 8:15, she contacted the bank, and at 8:27, the words unauthorized account modification likely crossed her lips for the first time. By 8:59, she reached out to her lawyer. The bank's fraud department reached out for verification at 9:01 as I was preparing my second cup of coffee. I confirmed the details as I was sorting things out, not evading. At 10:06, the final voicemail arrived. Dennis's tone quieter but more menacing. She threatened to make things ugly if I didn't respond, claiming she would seek revenge and ruin me. Dennis believed she was the victim, but I held all the evidence. She attempted to call once more as I opened my news app and saw a missed call from her. Instead of calling back right away, I decided to let her stew in the rejection, trapped in her echo chamber where she always believed she held power over me. She failed to realize that her power was only temporary, borrowed from my good nature and patience. I had reclaimed every bit of it now. As she frantically tried to reach me, I calmly sipped my coffee, knowing that sometimes revenge doesn't require confrontation, but rather a simple act of ignoring the phone. By 11:02 a.m., Dennis was speeding down the road, her sunglasses unable to hide the mascara streaks on her face. The phone on speaker relentlessly rang every 5 minutes as she desperately tried to regain control. Oblivious to the chaos around her, she was consumed by the news of her job loss, frozen bank accounts, and impending mortgage issues due to corporate restructuring. Her world was crumbling at the edges, and there was no escaping the reality closing in on her. She needed an anchor. She needed the house, the place with the rose bushes she pretended to water for Instagram, the kitchen where she burned soup but filmed herself plating takeout like a gourmet chef, the upstairs bathroom with a mirror she called her truth teller because, in her words, it made her look younger than Roger deserves. That house was more than walls to her. It was her stage. So when she pulled into the driveway at 11:49 a.m., she expected to step back into her kingdom, to stomp up the stairs, find me brooding in the den, and start her monologue about what I'd really meant by all this. Maybe even pride. She was good at tears when cornered, but the house didn't greet her. The keypad glared red, her key didn't fit. She tried again, harder, jammed it like force could negotiate, then moved to the side door. Same result. Even the garage had a new panel. The panic rose faster this time, not the controlled chaos of her morning bank calls. This was raw, primal confusion. She pounded on the door with her palm, and with both fists shouted, "Now, Roger, open the damn door. What the hell is this?" Nothing. The house was still. She pressed her face to the window by the dining room, shielding her eyes from the glare. That's when it hit her. The chandelier, the one she insisted we install for ambience, was gone. The dining table was replaced by something sleek and modern, glass and chrome instead of reclaimed wood. There was no trace of the beige runner she bought from that overpriced boutique or the framed wedding photo on the shelf. And the worst part, there were shoes by the door, not hers, not mine, new ones, possibly wooden size 7, black flats neatly aligned on a mat she didn't buy. Her face went pale. She ran around to the back patio and tried to slide open the door she used to leave ajar for fresh air. It didn't budge. She rattled it, stomped, and screamed. A voice called out from across the street, "Denise." She turned. It was Harold, retired, widowed, and nosy as hell, always trimming his hedges like the yard was a battleground. "I thought you moved out last week," he said. He was surprised to see her return, blinking in bewilderment. She stared at him wide-eyed, as though shocked by his presence. "What do you mean?" she questioned, perplexed. Oblivious, he absent-mindedly scratched his chin and mentioned a young woman with curly hair who had moved in recently, assuming she was a relative. "I thought she was your niece," he said. Greeting her, the woman clarified that she was actually the new tenant. Upon hearing this, the woman's mind spun as she gazed back at the house. The doormat no longer bore the word welcome, but now read live deliberately, signaling a fresh chapter within her home. Dennis remained still for a moment before frantically reaching for her phone. Checking for any missed calls or new messages, she began typing a message to Roger, her thumb trembling with urgency. Expressing her concern and asserting her rights, she warned that she would involve a lawyer if necessary. Shortly after sending the message, she noticed it joined the rest in the archive folder, interactions that now seemed a mix of flirtation and conflict. Attempting to call once more, her efforts were futile as the call went straight to voicemail. Across town, I was seated in a downtown cafe, enjoying the cup of espresso as I reviewed the lease agreement that my niece had drafted. It was a 12-month term to be paid in full, with Claire Harper listed as the tenant. My niece, who held a law degree and had excellent credit, made it clear that she had no tolerance for drama. The house was no longer where it used to be. It had moved on. Dennis found herself excluded from a life she had tried to control through humiliation. At precisely 3:06 p.m., the doorbell broke the moment of solitude. Cynthia, still in her robe and halfway through her second mimosa, answered the door with annoyance. She was not fond of surprises, especially not from couriers brandishing clipboards and demanding signatures. The man, devoid of emotion, presented a thick envelope without a return address. "Dennis R., my sister," Cynthia interjected, but the man was unfazed and insisted on waiting for the signature. Shortly after, Denise, barefoot and disheveled after her futile attempts to reach me, rushed down the hallway. Her appearance was disheveled, with messy hair and smudged eyeliner giving her the look of someone who had endured a marathon through legal uncertainty. She signed the paperwork, expecting a letter from a lawyer, bank, or perhaps a heartfelt apology from me with flowers tucked inside as we used to do in our younger years. When we believed in happy endings, she opened the envelope. What she found inside was a stark contrast to her assumptions. A document detailing the nullification of their marriage through the dissolution of a trust. This was not a filing for divorce, nor a mere request, but a definitive declaration with cold, final consequences. The trust that had safeguarded all assets was now officially and irreversibly severed from her ownership, leaving no room for appeal or negotiation. The second page contained a court notification, confirming the transfer of ownership with official stamps and signatures. The house she had just been locked out of was never truly hers. The bank had recognized the transfer to a new tenant named Claire Harper, who was now the rightful legal owner. Dennis now found herself with no more standing than a raccoon on a front porch. Lastly, the third page held a low-resolution still image that revealed the message on her phone screen. "Guess who I humiliated tonight?" Below it, a detached image of me seemingly unfazed, chewing on steak, unaware of the unfolding drama. Dennis looked at the note from Otto, the man she had been thinking about all year, and the ex she had considered a lesson rather than a real person. As she read the handwritten sentence at the end, her expression drained of color, as if all life had suddenly been sucked out of her. The note said, "This wasn't about him. This was about you not seeing me." There were no signatures, no threats, just a stark statement that echoed in the room. The silence that followed felt heavier than any explosion of emotions. Dennis sat on the couch, unable to utter a word. Cynthia, noticing her distress, asked once, then again, but received no response. Dennis stared at the note, feeling its impact deeper than any courtroom verdict could ever reach. She had always viewed humiliation as a weapon, a tool to assert power. But this was different. It was deliberate, precise, and devoid of any audience to witness her anguish. In that moment, there was only the couch, the note, and a harsh truth she couldn't deny. This encounter wasn't focused on her ex. It highlighted her blind spot, me. She arrived late, sporting mismatched oversized sunglasses, a rumpled blouse, and disheveled hair. Despite her defiant posture, her nervous hands and fidgety purse strap revealed her inner turmoil. We met at a clean, unassuming cafe, devoid of memories or nostalgia, immersed in soft jazz and the hum of the espresso machine. I sat there with my black coffee, awaiting her arrival. As she spotted me, she adjusted her glasses defensively and approached with forced confidence. Without a greeting, she stood there with crossed arms, questioning the purpose of our meeting. "You appear strong, but it gives off a sense of pettiness." I calmly sipped my coffee, placed it down gently, and then pushed the folder across the table using 2 fingers. The gesture was serene, precise, and quiet. Without touching it, she simply stared at the folder. "You said I'm not half the man your ex is," I uttered in a low voice. "Good news. He gets half the blame too." Her mouth moved as if to speak, but no words came out. "What is this documentation?" I inquired. "It's in case you need a reminder of who played which role," I added. Reluctantly, she opened the folder. The first page displayed a timeline of bank transactions. Not mine, but hers. It included tagged purchases, hotel stays, and withdrawals in unfamiliar cities. The timestamps coincided with photos she had sent me from various locations. The second page revealed GPS data from her phone and car, obtained legally through her elected auto insurance login. She had always mocked me for being old-fashioned when it came to technology, but as it turned out, I was just discreet. The third page showcased images captured by a private investigator over a span of 6 weeks. It depicted Denise kissing Jared in the parking lot of a Holiday Inn Express, merely 2 hours before she. Dee informed me about her friend facing a wellness emergency, which included her friend booking a lakeside airbnb with only one bed instead of two. Hastily, she scrolled through the messages, her hands trembling, hoping to find an explanation or a way to shift the blame and regain the spotlight. However, she came across the final section, which contained her own texts, highlighted and printed. "You were always better in bed. I wish it was you I came home to," the message read. Roger remained silent, his expression conveying disbelief. Dee slowly realized that it wasn't a mere coincidence that I found out, but rather a deliberate discovery on my part. As she recoiled from the folder as if it were dangerous, I calmly stated, "This is not me being unfair, Denise. You made the choice to stoop low, and I simply have evidence to prove it." Her voice strained, she argued. "You could have approached me about this. We could have discussed it like adults and resolved it. We have a history, for heaven's sake, Roger." Leaning in with a smirk, I replied, "You had a chance to choose between a real partnership and putting on a performance. You opted for the spotlight. This is how your story concludes." He sat back, realizing the repercussions of her actions. With her arms folded, Dennis asked, "So, what's next? An apology? A confession?" I took a final sip of my coffee before replying, "No, I want exactly what I already have. Peace." Dennis remained seated without a word, appearing still for the first time in weeks, maybe months. The weight of the folder on the table felt oppressive, each page a heavy burden. As I prepared to leave, I paused behind her chair and spoke softly. "I allowed you to play your game. Now I'm settling the score." Without any further remarks or lingering glances, I walked out, leaving Denise alone at the table with the evidence that her tirade was finally over. The following morning, an email arrived promptly at 8:03 a.m. with the subject line, "Mandatory appearance for a confidential mediation review from an unfamiliar law office." It was formal and devoid of any dramatic threats or ultimatums, simply providing a date, time, and uptown address. Denise forwarded the email to Cynthia with a dismissive comment, "He's resorting to his legal mind games again." "Fine, I'll attend and put an end to it." With resolve, she showed up at the designated location. Dressed in towering heels that exuded more flamboyance than confidence and wearing a makeup mask that seemed too heavy for the early hour, she entered the building with an air of self-assuredness, as if she were still the leading lady who could command attention with her words alone. The receptionist offered her a glass of water, which she politely declined, viewing any admission of thirst as a sign of weakness. A stoic gentleman in a sharp charcoal suit led her into the meeting room with a curtain as raw this way. Inside, the room was austere with a single long table and 3 chairs, a flat screen on the wall already displaying a muted image. As she hesitated in her stride, the screen showcased a frozen moment from a restaurant scene, her face contorted in a mocking toast, eyes gleaming with malice, a raised wine glass capturing the cruel gesture. Then the footage began to play, capturing her voice in crystal clarity as she delivered a cutting remark. "You'll never be half the man my ex is," followed by a crescendo of laughter, her own ringing louder than she remembered. Roger remained composed, chewing thoughtfully as the scene unfolded. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to erase the playback. "Is this some sort of elaborate scheme?" she retorted sharply. "Did he hire a filmmaker for this?" The lawyer remained silent as the screen transitioned to footage from a hotel lobby, cutting off mid-sentence. King stood with Jared, clad in yoga leggings and oversized sunglasses, her hand casually resting on his chest at the reception desk. They were seen clinking glasses in the hotel bar, with his hand intimately placed on her thigh. Later, on a cabin porch, Denise was captured in his lap, laughing with her shirt half off. The camera angle was from a low, far-off perspective, using the long lens. Taken aback, Denise stepped back, feeling violated, and stammered out her shock. The lawyer, still silent, clicked the remote to pause the incriminating video, freezing the screen on Denise kissing Jared outside a rental car. "I believe," he said calmly, "you previously referred to these encounters as your weekends with friends." Dennis's knees nearly gave out, and she sank into a chair, whispering that no one was supposed to see that. The lawyer continued, sliding a folder loaded with evidence toward her, including bank statements, text logs, and hotel bookings, all proving adultery and financial misuse of joint assets. Dennis remained silent, her mascara starting to crack under the pressure. Betraying the shock she had been struggling to contain, he spoke, turning to the final document. "You have violated the moral behavior clause in our prenup, which I must clarify has never expired." Dennis looked up, her lip trembling. "You're bluffing. He wouldn't go public." "That's not like him," she said. The lawyer met her gaze. "I'm not here to convince you he would. I'm here to ask if you prefer he didn't." A tense silence filled the room before he reached into a briefcase and produced a pen. "Here are the terms. You give up any claims to the house, forego spousal support, keep your car, personal belongings, and receive a modest severance payment from the trust. These terms are non-negotiable." She stared at the folder, her name printed in an impersonal font above the words "waiver of entitlement." Her voice trembled as she asked, "You really recorded everything?" The lawyer said nothing. He didn't need to. The screen behind him revealed her past, her lies, and her performances in their unfiltered, unedited truth. And there she stood, not the woman she aspired to be, but the woman she truly was. Simply pressing play was all it took. The courthouse lobby emitted the scent of polished and chilly air conditioning, impersonal, clinical, devoid of empathy. Roger lingered by the marble column near the exit, clad in a tailored gray jacket, hands casually clasped in front of him, no tie, no briefcase, holding just one envelope, cream-colored, heavy stock paper. His expression was inscrutable, neither cold nor harsh, just resigned. Dennis burst in like a spent storm. Her heels clattered on the stone floor, discordantly loud in the hush. She donned black attire as if mourning, but whether it was her marriage or her facade was uncertain. Her meticulously applied mascara was already smudged at the edges, her lips quivering not from chill. "Roger, wait," she implored, out of breath. Can we just talk for a moment?" He remained unmoved, not inching towards her, simply regarding her with a gaze that conveyed. Someone explored a burnt-down house and expressed surprise at the extent of the destruction. The visitor mentioned that they had been through challenges before and didn't expect things to reach this point. Their companion handed them an envelope in silence. The recipient took it cautiously, feeling its weight and significance. The visitor rushed to explain their previous hurtful words about someone named Jared, attributing it to being inebriated and upset. The other person, Roger, responded calmly, expressing disappointment in revealing his realization about the narrator's true nature. Dennis became emotional, nodding in acknowledgement of her mistakes. Roger then delivered a final blow, implying that she fell short of his expectations. With a slight brush of coffee and finality, he departed, leaving Denise in emotional turmoil, the sound of his shoes tapping once, twice, then fading into quiet as the heavy doors opened. Dennis stood in the center of the lobby, envelope still in hand, shaking as families and lawyers and strangers passed by, no one stopping. No one seeing her the way she needed to be seen. Inside the envelope was no letter, no parting words, just a single printed page. Finalized agreement signed, filed, executed. And below that, a small printed quote, faint in gray ink. "Some endings aren't loud, they're clean." And for the first time in her life, Dennis realized silence could be louder than any revenge.